So Yorktown Heights, obviously it's your first time going it alone.
Yeah, Yorktown Heights, yeah.
How's it been so far? I mean, how have you found it? Just you?
Yorktown Heights, me on my own. It's been really good fun. I mean, obviously with the feeder stuff, there's much more history, and I suppose a bit more pressure in some way. You know, I mean, the solo album was, I didn't really plan on being a solo artist. It was just, I just basically wrote a bunch of songs, and it just kind of turned into my first solo album. I think after 20 years of feeder, I just felt like I needed to do something different for a while. Get back to basics and back to how I write most of the songs anyway, which is on acoustic guitar, often this one. I was trying to make an album that sort of touched on a lot of records I grew up listening to, whether it was albums from the 70s. You know, I love the sound of those records and just the way they flowed. They had almost like a concept to them in some way. Not always sort of lyrically, but just like sonically. And I wanted this album to sound warm and fat and be, you know, more acoustic based. So yeah, and it's ended up being my first solo album. So we'll have to see what happens now.
How long did it take you to make?
It was probably, I would say, around 18 months, but it wasn't like solidly. You know, there was gaps. I went to New York 2 or 3 times to mainly do vocals and overdubs. Came back and wrote some more. Went back to New York. I've recorded a lot at home in my little home studio in my back garden, which is called the Treehouse. I went to a lovely residential studio called Angelic, which is out past Silverstone Way, where we did most of the drum tracks. So yeah, it's been a really nice journey. It's just been sort of nice to work at home, to be in America. You know, it's all brought something, you know, to the album. I think lyrically and just, you know, being in a different headspace, being away from friends and family and my kids. You know, made me really focus on the record. You know, when I first arrived in New York, it was about 4 foot of snow, so we were kind of snowed in for about a week. And that was, you know, it was just kind of nice being. I think for a writer, it's always good to be, you know, to sort of find different places to write and being in a different headspace sometimes.
Who's helped you make the record production?
Well, the album was sort of self-produced, but I worked with three very good engineers, and I've actually ended up giving them a credit for, you know, co-production as well, because I felt they worked so hard. I worked with a friend of mine who lives in New York, and I was he has his own studio in Yorktown Heights, which is where the album title came from. And his name is Brian Sperber. Then I worked with a guy called Sam Miller, who's a young engineer who did a brilliant job. And then I worked with another engineer called Tim Rowe, who basically did most of the stuff at my home studio. So it's just been nice. And I worked, you know, and the engineers that I've worked with are really experienced, and they're quite opinionated at times, which is good. You know, you don't want to be surrounded by yes people when you're making a record. You need to have different opinions, and I like to work with, you know, I like to have other people in the room with me sometimes. It's just nice to have ideas, just bounce back ideas. You know, especially when you're doing vocals, it can be quite a daunting time doing vocals on an album sometimes. So it's nice to have a little bit of feedback from, you know, the engineer and stuff.
And how has it been being away from the band setting? I mean, does it feel very different, or?
It feels very different being away from feeder, yeah. I mean, in some way nice, probably a little bit sort of less pressure, and, you know, going back to basics in some way, just the way we're doing shows, like really small shows with hardly any crew, having to load the van up. But I'm kind of really enjoying it. I know it might sound weird, but it's been really enjoyable going back to kind of how I started. I think to do this album in a full-blown way straight off would be the wrong sort of message, and it wouldn't. That's kind of not how I made the record. I want it to be, you know, like a slow burn, and hopefully the gigs will start small and intimate, and hopefully if the album does okay, we can sort of, you know, move into, doing some bigger shows and possibly some festivals. I'm off to Japan to do Fuji Rock Festival, so that's my first festival appearance. But yeah, I just think it's just been really good fun. You know, it's been a lot of work. I've done a lot of things that I don't normally do. It's on my own label, which is called Poppin' Candy, and I've had to sort of do a lot of business stuff, which I don't do in feeder as much. So that's been a real learning curve. I've almost been kind of managing myself a little bit, which is not always that enjoyable. You know, you kind of realise that actually managers do something for their 20%.
And I mean, when you decided you were going to do this,
yeah,
what did you say to the boys?
Well, I mean, there's only 2 full-time members in feeder. It's basically myself and Taka. He was doing like another project in Japan, so it felt like a good time to do this. You know, there was no real big plan. I just felt I knew I'd do something like this at some point in my life, and it just felt, at the end of the last feeder tour, we finished up at Brixham Academy. We had a really great show, and I just wanted to sort of stop on a real high. And Taka was doing like a different project in Japan, so I felt that would keep him busy while I did this. But that's kind of, I think his project kind of finished a while ago, so he's waiting for me to come back to feeder now. It will happen. I've already written some new feeder songs as well, but I just hope he understands that I kind of need to do this now, and it's you know, it's like the next chapter in my life, you know.
So after the record comes out, what do you know you've got lined up? How much touring?
Well, I'm going to be doing a UK tour September, October, going back for a Japanese tour, some more festivals probably next year, possibly some more dates in December as well. If this tour goes well, we'll do some more dates in December, and then I think it will probably sort of roll into next year, and I'll have to sort of fit this around doing the next feeder album as well. So I may be doing a little bit of this at one weekend, and then maybe I'll do like the rock festival feeder. So, you know, I see no reason why I can't do that, you know. Obviously feeder is my main priority, but this is also a massive, you know, priority to me as well. You know, I may not make another solo record, so I want to make sure that I give this one every chance. 'Cause I've been treading water for too long, drifting ever closer to the storm, working for the weekend.